Hey there, community bankers. Welcome back to the Correspondent podcast from Independent Correspondent Bankers Bank. I'm your host, Madison Kaplinger, Marketing Specialist for ICBB. The Federal Reserve recently announced it'll be sunsetting its foreign and Canadian check service by the year-end 2026, driven by declining transaction volumes and changing market demand. This means that community banks are racing to find alternative options before the end of the year. While Canadian checks may be a small part of business for most banks, even services used infrequently can play an important role for community banks and their customers. That's why I brought Dan Caputo from our international payments partner Ascendant on the podcast to discuss the transition and how community banks can prepare with me and customer experience manager Chasity Bruce. Please welcome Dan and Chasity to the podcast. All right. Hey there, community bankers. I am here with Dan Caputo from Ascendant FX and our customer experience manager, Chasity Bruce. How are you guys doing today?
We're good, Madison. Thanks for having us.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you guys for coming on. I know the Fed is about to discontinue the processing of Canadian checks. So I wanted to give our customers some insight into how to deal with that. But first, just, tell the audience a little bit about yourselves and your careers and kind of where you're focusing in banking.
Sure. Would you like me to go first?
Of course. We're going to let the star of the show happen first.
Well, my name's Dan Caputo. I'm with Ascendant Global Payments, and we help community banks provide international services to their customers, Canadian check clearing being one of those services. I've been doing this far longer than I'd like to admit, but about 30 years now. And our goal is primarily to help you guys build fences around your customers so that they don't have to look elsewhere for the services that they may need.
Okay. That, Dan, 30 years at an institution is just extremely impressive, and that's something to be proud of. I would not hesitate on letting that be known for sure. So I hope to one day be 30 years with ICBB. But hi, everyone. I am Chasity Bruce. I am the customer experience manager here with ICBB, and I have been employed, thankfully, for 10 years this year. They have put up with me for that long.
Excellent.
That's amazing. And I mean, we're definitely glad we have you, Chasity, and we're glad we can partner with you guys, Dan, to offer the international payment services to our customers through you guys. And especially right now, as I said, the Fed is, what's the right way to say it? The Fed is discontinuing their processing of Canadian checks. So this is pretty far out of my wheelhouse in terms of operations. So I'm going to be asking a lot of questions I truly don't know the answers to. But hopefully it'll be helpful for our bankers and our operations folks that are listening. So to start out, can you explain what Canadian check processing through the Federal Reserve actually is and how banks have historically used it?
Sure. Historically, banks have used the Federal Reserve to clear their foreign items, Canadian or other currencies, mainly because they already had a relationship with the Fed, and it was just easy to add this on as an extra service. So it was a logical extension of what they were currently doing to do their Canadian check clearing. That's primarily why. Now, why the customers accepted the checks in the first place? Because they wanted to compete with the big boys. The fact is if a customer needs any type of international service, if a community bank doesn't provide that, it forces the customer at the very least to look elsewhere for some of the business, but more than likely, all of the business would eventually go over to somebody else. Even though international is going to be the smallest piece of business they have with any customer, the ones that need it are going to need the letters of credit, the accounts, the insurance, all the rest of the services that a community bank provides. So this is just one little picket in a fence around the customer so that they don't need to look elsewhere.
Right, that makes sense. So why is the Federal Reserve sunsetting this service now at the end of 2026?
I don't know absolutely 100% why they've made that decision. I have made several guesses. One is because it's such a manual process. It is very expensive. They're sunsetting it at the end of this year. I'm not sure if you are aware that for 2026, for the rest of this year, they have substantially increased the fees for those items. So it went from if you sent in one check, it cost you about $27. Now, if you send in one check, Canadian check, it's $55. So the prices have gone up for this year, I'm assuming as their way of encouraging people to find alternatives.
Phasing it out.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, by the end of the year, it'll be phased out. So I believe it's because of a couple of reasons. One, check volumes have been decreasing, so the cost of maintaining the service keeps going up, but the profit from it keeps going down. Compliance issues dealing with foreign country regulations that the Fed is not able to monitor because they are not an international provider. They just happen to do it. And the main thing, I think, is the Fed was not really keeping up with advances in technologies. Physical checks still had to be FedExed to the Fed for clearing, whereas now there are options to scan in the item and not have to physically send the checks onward, which of course means faster clearing, faster returns, faster exchange rates, all of that kind of stuff. And so that's why I think that the Fed has decided to go down this route.
Okay, so the Federal Reserve is still FedExing these checks.
Yeah, it's still very, very manual, and it's still a lengthy turnaround.
Wow. That's kind of anxiety inducing for me to think about. I mean, just the process of mailing a check.
Well,
but
personally, I think that that's one of the reasons why we have, companies like Dan, is they help. I don't think it's going to be a tough transition for customers because most people already use a provider for that because the Fed made it a little, lengthy of a turnaround. And personally, I did think that this was going to come sooner rather than later, because you don't hear the Fed talk a whole lot about them offering that service for a reason.
right. Yeah, that makes sense. So then, if we have these volumes, these check volumes decreasing, including, international checks, how many US community banks are still processing Canadian checks? And I mean, why does that matter, even if check volumes are declining?
There's a couple of responses to that question. It matters because the customers that need them are still going to need them. And if you don't provide it, as I kind of indicated earlier, they're going to have to look elsewhere for a solution for that. And yes, the checks is going to be a small overall portion of the overall business, but the customers who happen to be dealing in Canada, are still going to be getting those checks because the Canadian banks charge a very high fee for their customers to wire a US dollar wire to the United States. So that's why so many Canadian companies write checks instead.
I don't think checks will ever go away. I just think that the number of items will be significantly stagnant at a low number. And I think that because it is going to be one of the main ways to do financial transactions cross borders because of the fees associated with wires and ACHs. But I mean, if the fees with checks keep increasing, it could possibly very well go away.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Especially with the implementation of FedNow.
Yeah, right. That makes sense. It's like you've got, an increasing, number of payment rails that are increasingly easier and cheaper. And then if checks get, they're not getting faster and they're getting, if anything, more expensive, it does beg the question. What were you about to say, Dan?
Well, I was just going to comment that FedNow will certainly replace the domestic check. The international, not so much, because it still has to cross the border, and FedNow doesn't currently cross borders. Nothing the Fed has basically discontinued all international services. So, yeah, at this time, I'm not aware of any talk of fixing that so that FedNow can be international as well.
Well, I don't know if it will be with ISO, now that there is ISO, but I don't think that's going to get rid of the need of you, simply because you're offering that tracker, and
Right.
the Fed's not giving that.
Absolutely.
People want to know where their money's at.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. There's some really good points. So I'm curious what happens. So fast forward to, end of the year 2026, early 2027, the Fed has sunsetted this program, stopped accepting Canadian checks. So what happens then when a bank accepts a Canadian check? What process do they have to go through?
They will have to find a partner in advance of accepting the check, because obviously it takes time for a bank to do its due diligence, a vendor due diligence. So they need to be prepared for it ahead of time. But otherwise, they need to find a partner like ICBB who can, help them facilitate this kind of cross-border service.
Yeah. And when it comes to contract negotiation, the time to start would be now.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So there's no pathway for them to do anything with that check within themselves and with their own infrastructure. They need a partner to get that check to where it needs to go.
That's right.
There could be one alternative. They could call up a Canadian bank and they could open an account with that Canadian bank and they could do the processing that way. But that's going to cost them tens of thousands of dollars for having the accounts and being a non-resident and a lot of due diligence and compliance. So unless they're doing tens of thousands of checks a month, probably not a good alternative.
True. That makes sense. And like a lot of things we do, the alternative, as a banker's bank, I mean, the alternative is costly and inefficient. So that kind of begs the question then, if Canadian checks are no longer easily processed through the Fed, you won't be able to process them at all after the end of this year. And right now it's more expensive than ever.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the alternatives banks have, as far as not just what you guys do, but anything? Like, what are their options?
There are a couple. Obviously, finding a partner to help them with those checks, that's number one. Second thing, they could work with their customers to get a better understanding of what their needs are so that they could say, okay, maybe we can work with you to be able to receive those funds electronically. So, for example, we have a lot of customers who are in Canada and your customer's customer is in the US, and we can work with that Canadian company to be able to help them do an ACH directly to you that they can't do through their Canadian bank. Alternatively, we have what we call virtual accounts, which is an account we would open up in the name of the bank or the corporation so that they could receive incoming Canadian funds into that account. And then we would just do the conversion and send the converted US dollars to their account by ACH. Those options are much faster, much cheaper overall, and of course more secure because they don't bounce like checks do, or payment stopped or fraud, all of those wonderful things.
But right, that makes sense. And in the event that a check is not your only option, then that's great. But as far as when a check is the best payment option, it sounds like finding a partner is really the only viable pathway for a lot of these banks.
Correct. Yeah.
I definitely wouldn't. I see maybe a few community banks trying to discontinue the service period because, dealing internationally could potentially pose as, scary. But I definitely would not turn away accepting that foreign check. I would go ahead and just find that partner and have that service readily available so you can continue to keep that customer retention.
I've had a lot of customers over the years who said, oh, no, we don't want to accept the Canadian checks because they take too long to clear. There's too much risk and there's fraud and all this kind of stuff. The nice thing is the solution that you guys currently use, which is in place for several of your banks, which is they can take the physical check, scan it through the scanner, upload it into our system. They get a credit the next day, and returns are in 2 to 3 days. So those days of checks taking 3 or 4 weeks to clear and come back have gone. And the fact is that the risk is very low now. It always comes down to that, know your customer. I mean, if it's Bill Gates walking in and opening an account and putting $1 million check in there, you can probably accept that and process it no problem. You know, if myself walked in with $1 million check, maybe that one you're not going to send as a provisional credit. You're going to do that one as a collection item, which is an additional service that can be added to the checks for large value checks that the bank maybe feels a little uncomfortable giving immediate credit on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Calling all women in community banking. Join us on Friday, April 24th at Eastern Kentucky University for Ladies Link. This event will be a day of leadership lessons, camaraderie, and fun that you won't want to miss. And we'll end the day with a women in banking panel full of faces you may recognize. Register now at the link in the show notes. Right, that makes sense. And I think this shift, if I can switch gears just a little bit, but the shift by the Fed kind of signals, a larger shift in international payments, with the Federal Reserve really moving away from anything international. But I have to assume that international payments as a whole, just going out of the United States, are not slowing down, probably ramping up, if anything. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But it kind of shows this need for community banks to think about international payment strategy going into the future. So how should community banks think about their international payments strategy as a whole moving forward?
Well, first of all, I mean, when they partner with somebody like ICBB, I mean, yes, we're the specialists behind the scene, but your team is so good and knows so much information. We're always here for support. And that's really what we're both designed to do, is to help those community banks who aren't experts at international be comfortable and understand it's not scary. It's very simple to do, and we can help you do it. We're happy to get on a call if they have an important customer they're trying to onboard who happens to have international questions. Whatever we can do to help them onboard their customers, that's what we're here for, is to help. So, I mean, the strategy that I think would be that they, of course, need to find a partner. That's strategy number one. But really, they need to engage their customers. They need to discuss with them, what are your needs? What are you doing that maybe we're not helping you with? What could we help you with? And come back to you guys with questions to say, okay, I have a customer who needs to do this. Any ideas, any solutions? And of course, Chasity can tell you we always come back with something. Oh, well, we can help with this or this or this or this. Depends on the situation.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever been a time I've not gotten a straightforward answer, which is very comforting, because in return, we get to help our customer and educate our customer, so that way they know going forward, which is important.
And I touched on this earlier. I'll just reiterate it because it's very important, is those international services, whether it's the checks or whether it's the outgoing wires or whether it's incoming wires or whatever, foreign cash, whatever the service is, if the community bank doesn't offer it or doesn't promote it on their website, and their customers or potential customers are looking to them and don't see it or don't have it as an option, then you've given them no choice but to, at the very least, look elsewhere. Maybe not for all the business, but they're going to take some of it. And I used to work for a bank many years ago. I know if somebody came to me because their bank didn't do something, I took all the business. I did not just say, yeah, I'll take the piece that they don't do.
Much like companies, a lot of, the general public they like to consolidate to one area. They don't want to have to go to two different places. Mm-hmm. And you don't know if your customers are going to want that service unless you offer it. And the first place they're checking is your website. At least, have a list of the services you offer on there. And then international being one of them is very important. Can also pose as a really good revenue point.
And one thing I will highlight is that Kentucky is one of the top 10 importing and exporting states in the U.S. They do huge amounts of international business. So when I hear a bank say, our customers don't need that, the answer is because they've left you.
Mm-hmm.
So,
That's right.
yeah, if you're trying to attract in those higher volume, higher value clients, this one little piece is a very important piece of that puzzle.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would echo, Chastity, what you said about the website. I mean, I've heard bank websites described as your online branch, as though, and it, should be treated as such. So it makes so much sense. That's where people are going to look first to see what you offer. And to your point, Dan, like if your customers are saying that they don't need that, or you don't have any customers that need that, well, there's opportunity out there somewhere. Potentially, you've lost business because someone did need that and they had to go to the bank down the street and ended up parking their accounts there. So earlier, I think, Chastity, I think it was you that said right now is the time to be, looking for a partner for when the Canadian check processing is officially sunsetting. So my next question is, what are the top 3 things that banks should be doing now to prepare? I'm going to guess that's number 1, but what are some other things that banks? That's the only one?
2. One is, again, looking for that provider. And I highly recommend, if you want to get out of the contract negotiation piece of it, it's partnering with ICBB. We've already negotiated that contract, and it comes directly in your billing. So we already have that service in place for you. It's just a simple fill out a user form. It's turned on. And then 2, education. ICBB offers free educational visits. Give us a call. We'll come down. We'll educate your staff. And as always, reach out to our deposit ops department. You can reach out to me. Everyone here is very knowledgeable. So we always have our customers' backs, and we will always be there to help them navigate through this transition. But those are the top 2 things that they should be doing, and those are the only 2 things that they should be doing.
I would add one more thing to that,
Okay.
which is you've already said how your team is so knowledgeable and experienced. I would recommend 1 or 2, maybe 3 people, depending on the size of the bank, kind of take it upon themselves to increase their knowledge so that they can be the resource there at the bank for these kinds of questions that come in, and helping to their loans officers to onboard new customers with questions that they may not be familiar with. So yeah, that's the only other thing I would add to that.
No, that's a really good point, and I cannot believe I missed on that. But that is an extremely good point. But if definitely look out for educational purposes. ICBB does offer educational purposes, but you can obviously and most definitely do your own research.
And the last thing I would add is update your website. I have to admit, I have gone through an awful lot of community bank websites and can't find a reference. And even though I know they do it, no reference to international services, which I think Chastity mentioned. That's probably where a new customer or a new business is going to go first. They might call, they might come in, but they're going to go to the website first just to see, oh, okay, do they have what I need before I go in?
Especially your business accounts.
Yeah,
absolutely. They're looking at your website. That is their first point of contact, is your website, to see what services you offer before they call you, before they visit you. They're going to want to make sure that their time is going to be utilized efficiently before they come into your branch.
And that's something sorry. I was going to say that's something ICBB and Ascendant can do. We can help them with the wording for, the different international services. I mean, they don't have to create it. They just have to publish it onto their site. We can help them with that kind of thing.
Yeah. And if you're worried about the compliance piece of advertising it, we have a very knowledgeable compliance officer that we can run these things through.
Yeah, I love how we started out with there's only one thing you need to do. And we made it to not just 3, but 4, right?
Well, this is what happens when you have a really good team of collaboration.
Yes.
There you go. Yes. And as far as the education piece, I think of Chastity as our ICBB resident expert in international payments. So
I wouldn't go
if someone, well, if a customer were to come to me with a question about international payments, I'd be like, that sounds like a Chastity question.
Everything, it's just when I first started here 10 years ago, it was the first thing I trained on, and I took a liking to it. I love international payments. I think they are interesting. There's something about them that just intrigues me, and I know when there's something that I don't know, I reach out to Dan, and most of the things that I know I've has come from Dan and his team. So, and I've just taken them and I've absorbed that information. So, shout out to Dan's team.
Thank you. Well, our team tries really hard. We understand that, we're helping a community bank provide a service to a customer. So, it's not like it's a partnership. That's the way we view it. We want to help them to be able to attract in those customers and to service them. Doesn't mean problems aren't going to happen. It's international. Mistakes happen. People key in the wrong data. These things happen, but we're here to help with all that kind of stuff.
Right. Between our team at ICBB and, your team, Dan, with Ascendant, I just have all the confidence in the world that our customers should have a very easy time, transitioning their service from, if they were already using the Fed, to being able to do the same things. And probably, it sounds like more through our partnership with you guys at ICBB.
Yeah, it's not as scary as it was many 20 years ago.
Yes, I reiterate that same line when I'm doing my trainings, because it's really not. I think the word international or the word foreign is what's giving our customers some pause. But in fact, it's the same risk, if not less, when you're doing a domestic transaction.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So I have one final question for you guys before we wrap up. And, similar to our last question, thinking toward the future, what should bankers be paying attention to next in international payments?
Their customers. Yeah, I mean, I would definitely gauge your customers and get their interest. But I'm sure Dan, he's got 30 years experience. He would have a much better answer for that question.
No, actually, that's a really great one, because you have to understand your customers' needs, or you can't possibly think you're going to meet them. And from a technology point of view, probably the two things that I would say that I can see some potential disruptions in the world is real-time global payments, not Fed now, of course, but real-time global payments and stable coins. I could see that also having some potential. It's still very early. It's still very gray. There's still a lot of compliance questions. But I can see that having potential, not just for the international, stablecoin has the potential for domestic disruption as well. So, yeah, I could see those being the future potential, not glitches, but hiccups.
Yeah. And I'm really glad that you mentioned stablecoin, because, as our customers are I'm sure worried and intrigued with that as well. And ICBB has acknowledged that. And so we've actually have an expert coming at our operations meeting this year to come and talk about stablecoin and what that's going to mean for us as financial institutions.
Yeah. And I've basically been told we won't be the first to absorb it in, but it will come. It's just, you want to be able to make sure that you can report to the regulators that it's the scams and the frauds that currently kind of get used in those particular segments. We don't want to be involved in those. We need to make sure we know our customers, and from a financial point of view, a financial institution point of view, I mean, you do due diligence on your customers before you onboard them. So you're going to have the proper information. So that's coming. Like I said, it might still be a few more years before we start to see any mainstream adoption, but I can see it.
But something so new, the time to prepare for that is now. There's no better time to prepare and educate, is right there in that moment, so that way you're ready 2-3 years from now when it does happen.
Kind of like what you said, understand your customers' needs, understand the options available, and then you might be able to combine those two in a very good level of service.
Yeah, the customer feels like the right answer so much of the time, in the same way that, like, if you're in Sunday school, when in doubt, say Jesus. In banking, when in doubt, say the customer. That's the right answer, probably.
ICBB should put that on a t-shirt and hand them out at the golf outing this year.
That could get dicey real quick, Chastity. All right. Well, Dan, Chastity, thank you both so much for joining me on the podcast to answer questions and just kind of talk through this new development. I'm hoping our customers will get a lot out of this conversation and just feel more prepared to walk into whatever, comes next in terms of international payments. And if they haven't already, hopefully they'll reach out to us and our team and make sure that they're prepared.
Absolutely. Dan, I just want to say thanks so much for jumping on it. It means so much that you take the time to be so engaged with us.
Like I said, customers, you have to engage with them to understand their needs. I do the same thing. You do the same thing. I'm hoping the banks do the same thing with their customers. It's important because it helps you be a better provider.
Well, you're definitely that. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. You're a great team to work with.
Thank you for listening to the Correspondent podcast from Independent Correspondent Bankers Bank. We hope you've heard something that you can take back to your community bank. Be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating and review, or on Spotify, turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. See you next time, community bankers.